My name is Sim. I'm the content manager at Unlimit. And as you know, we've started our Females in FinTech series, and we're really, really honored to have you for volume 4. So could you maybe start off by telling us a bit about yourself and your professional journey thus far?
Yes, of course. So my name is Maria Palma. I'm a general partner at Kindred Capital. So we are an early stage venture capital firm. We invest in a lot of really exciting startups at the very earliest stages, often before they even have a pitch. It's just can be a person and a story. I had a bit of a winding career to get here, which was absolutely incredible, but sounds a bit random, or like an incredible journey for me anyway. And I learned a lot. I am originally from the US in a small town in Wisconsin called Beaver Dam, and I studied industrial engineering at University of Wisconsin. Go Badgers. I spent the first 4 years of my career at GE Healthcare in supply chain operations. So they have these leadership programs where you switch jobs every 6 months for 2 years. So I did that in a variety of geographies and leadership positions, often managing teams of kind of like 19 to 30 people, and then spent the last 2 years at that organization thinking through international manufacturing moves because it was during the financial crisis. I realized that GE was so thoughtful about team and leadership and culture, and I learned so much there about how to be a better leader myself. But I also realized that all the jobs I was drawn to at GE were very kind of ambiguous, blank page. We don't know how to do it, which was something I loved, but wasn't like the typical supply chain feeling at a big company. And so I went back to business school. I did my MBA at Harvard, and I thought if I like ambiguity, I might like startups. To be clear, I didn't really have a clear sense of what startups looked like. Like I was pretty sheltered from like an industry perspective because I was only in one industry at that point. Kind of embarrassing to admit, but literally my first day of business school, I had to stop someone and say, like, what is this iBanking thing people keep talking about? I had never heard of investment banking in my life. But I ended up thinking if I liked ambiguity, I might like this startup thing. And I ended up cold emailing a woman in India. I worked for her at a startup in Bangalore for a few months and absolutely loved it. So then I was really excited about entrepreneurship in emerging markets, which I still am. And I moved to Brazil, worked for a tech accelerator, so much earlier stage startups, and just fell in love. So fell in love with early stage startups, which I still am. So I tried to co-found a company with a team there, still during business school. It didn't work out, but I learned a lot. And then I navigated to the New York ecosystem, and I joined a startup called iView, scaled with them from about 0 to 40 million in revenue, about 12 to 125 people, and wore a lot of hats as you do on that journey. But I had always stayed involved in the side, helping founders, sometimes in the New York ecosystem, sometimes in different settings. Like I was involved for many years with an organization called African Entrepreneur Collective in Africa that works with refugee founders. And so I decided to go to venture because a friend of mine pointed out that I'm always drawn to helping founders. So I spent 5 years at a fund in New York, both on the operating and investing side, and then moved to London recently and joined Kindred.
That sounds absolutely incredible. You've definitely been around the world as well, which is amazing. So, of course, you touched upon your education and how you went back to school, which I think is so inspiring in itself. So, how do you feel that going back to school and having that sort of incredible path within education has leveraged your chances as a woman to enter these industries that we would refer to as STEM?
Yeah, it's interesting. I mean, I think even my undergrad, right, industrial engineering, I give a ton of credit to my mom for that. So when I was much younger, she read somewhere that women don't go into STEM as much, which unfortunately is still the statistics. And so she got me really engaged early. So I used to go to like chemistry labs when I was like really young. And she just kind of got me into math and science and got me learning things, I think, a little bit ahead of time so that I would feel comfortable learning them in school. And I think I just always loved math and science from there. And so I think that really helped. And I picked engineering because I didn't know what I wanted to do and I liked math and science. So, and I do think engineering at that moment, it changes a lot, less true today. But when I graduated in 2007, if you had an engineering degree and with good marks, you could get a lot of jobs. And so I think it's a little different today. The MBA is a little more complicated because I think you don't need it in today's world. It's quite an expensive thing to do. I paid it back for many, many years. But I think that the people undervalue the life experience. The life experience there was incredible. I was exposed to so many industries and even the learning experience that I got even outside of like traditional career stuff. So there's a class at HBS called Business, Government, and International Economy. And you learn about a different country every single day, what is their kind of balance of trade and what are the politics and the history of that country. And it was a really incredible way to just think through the world. And I think it opened up my perspective on a lot of things. But I don't think you need it for a lot of things these days, an MBA. But I think to your point, there is actually a little bit of that credibility. I think somehow as a woman or as maybe an underrepresented group, it can help make your resume stand out or open doors. But I think that's becoming less and less true, which is good for everyone.
Yeah, definitely. And I think with the expanding sort of markets and the way that companies are welcoming people on board into their teams, it happens through so many different means now. People go through it in apprenticeships, and many companies are now open to educating as well. But that's not to negate the incredible journey that you've been on whatsoever. And, it's led you to being now the general partner at Kindred Capital, which you must absolutely love. And it's so phenomenal. So how long have you actually been with the organization now, and what's inspired you to stay there for so long?
So I've been with them, I guess, a little over a year, like a year and a half almost. Kindred is just, I keep telling people I feel like I won the lottery. I get to work with great humans, and we're trying to do venture, I think, as best as we can for founders and for LPs. So we do a few things differently. Like we share 20% of the carry of the fund, which is like the upside. So if you were at a startup, it would be equity. We share it with founders and with our community. So if we invest in your startup, you get the upside of the other companies in the fund and not just your fund. And it's just really in this belief in humility that we're not the ones building company, and founders learn best from other founders. And how do we enable that? And so I think I joined Kindred because when I was coming to London, I just felt like they were trying to do venture as best as they could. And it was just an incredible group of people and from very diverse backgrounds thinking through how we can best serve founders. And that really resonated with me. And I have a very rare privilege that I absolutely love my work. I have a 1.5-year-old and a baby on the way in August. So, I don't know if it would be as easy to get out the door on certain days if I didn't absolutely love what I do. So I'm very fortunate to do that. And I would say sometimes things make sense in hindsight. Like I just presented my career to you in a sort of way that made some semblance, it probably didn't, but I presented it that way. But I think the truth is you don't really know. When I was 18, I had no idea what I wanted to do. And the only way you know what you want to do is you kind of like try it, see what you like, and then figure it out. It's not that frequently in life you can make really big transitions, but I also find that people often don't realize they can make those transitions. They kind of said, oh, I did marketing before, so now I have to do marketing now. And the truth is, you can do whatever you want to do. Sometimes it takes you a few steps to navigate there, or you have to learn a new skill, or you have to meet new types of people. But I think, find the thing that in your gut you really want to do.
It's so lovely to hear that, because I think that's what so many young girls and women of all ages need to hear. Because I think, like you said, people get to a certain age and they think, oh gosh, I should probably just stay in the career that I'm in now. I've got more experience. But you're so right. It's all about what you enjoy. And also congratulations on your baby that's coming along the way in
Thank you.
August.
Yeah, little girl, very excited. Yeah, it's a
Oh,
really good point that you make. I think when I switched to venture specifically, I cannot tell you how many, it was a pretty painful process. And I was pretty sure from talking to people that I would really love it. But I think a lot of people weren't really sure that I was capable of doing it, in full fairness to them. So I think that, we all never really know if we're capable of doing it because the returns take a long time to find out. But I think that a lot of people on that journey as I transitioned told me like, you don't have the background, you shouldn't do this, you're not capable of doing this. And some quite credibly so, right? I think it's, on the one hand, you do not want to overly listen to that, but it's also important to listen to why and calibrate and see what you agree with and what you don't. And this one particular person really got in my head about it. I got really far in their interview process. They passed, and he said, can I just offer you some advice on the side? Like, why are you doing this? You've been operating for 10 years and you could just go to an operating career. Like I'd put you in the C-suite of any of my startups. Why are you doing this venture thing? You're going to go like take a salary cut and take a title like demotion and blah, blah, blah. Why are you doing this? And he, like, for 24 hours, I thought, crap, maybe he's right. And maybe this is the wrong move. And then I went for a run one morning. And I just remember thinking like, I have actually been thoughtful about why I think I'm going to like this. And if he's already pigeonholing me now into this, if I do this longer, it's going to happen only more. And sometimes I like to ask myself in those kind of transitions, like, what would my 80-year-old and what would my 5-year-old self think? Because I think it helps you give a perspective that's a little bit less rooted in all the things you're scared about at the moment. And I was just like, no, both of those would be like, go for this. You think you like it, go try it. What's the worst that can happen? You suck at it, you hate it, great. You can go back to whatever you were doing before, but there's really only one way to know, you know?
That's an amazing mindset. I love that. I've never thought of looking at it from both like age perspectives. I think it's such a good way to get that sort of like retrospective point of view. And I mean, look at your journey now and how far you've come. It's amazing. And I think a lot of women need that confidence boost. And that's why we're doing what we're doing today. So that's lovely to hear. So, of course, you've gone through like a sort of brief overview of your highlights of your career so far. Could you maybe pick one highlight that you think has been the most significant in your career so far?
I mean, that's a tricky one. I think I would pick things where I personally grew a lot. So, like, one of them, I ended up having to manage a number of manufacturing transfers when I worked at GE, where you're essentially moving an operation from one country to another. And as a result, you're essentially getting a team together to work on this very challenging project, but you're essentially getting the team together where one group is taking the jobs of the other group. So it's very complex background. And building trust in that setting was really hard. And we quite frankly screwed it up horribly once, to the point at which I was like crying on the floor at one point in the office, which is not my usual how I show up. But we really got it better the next time around. And it was such a powerful lesson to me as a leader in terms of how do you build the right trust and environment for the team around you. And I think it shaped the way that I think about leading today and any other moment. And I think it also shapes the way that I assess teams that I want to invest in. And so I think most of the moments in my career that I have most enjoyed, even if I haven't enjoyed them when I'm going through them as much, are the ones that just really push me to change the way that I show up and progress on my own path.
No, thank you for that. That's amazing to hear. So following on from what you said, what do you think the key is to being a successful woman in STEM and also as a successful female leader?
I mean, I don't know that we would call me a successful female leader. It's hard to know. You're always on your journey. But I would say that I think you just have to be very reflective and willing to observe yourself. I think it doesn't matter if you're a woman in STEM or a male in a different field. It's actually kind of the same. You have to understand what your strengths are and what your weaknesses are and really lean into your strengths, but also try to develop the things that aren't as naturally strong for you and complement yourself with people around you where maybe that is their strength. So I feel like asking for feedback, there are a lot of industries and a lot of companies, doesn't matter if they're big or small, that you don't really naturally get feedback, or if you do, it's quite muted. And I find that asking for the very specific, like after you've given a presentation, just go up to someone you really trust and say, hey, what did I do well there? What could I have done better? And I think it's just like a constant path to self improvement. And there's feedback you take and feedback you don't take. But if you aren't asking the questions and you don't realize how you're being perceived, you can't decide what you want to change and how you want to show up.
Yeah, I think that's really sound advice. I think that's very true. So you mentioned that you've been with Kindred Capital for just over a year now. So in your time there, what have you noticed that they do to implement a non-biased environment to create opportunity for all, irrespective of creed, gender, and every other
Yep.
category that we could think of?
So there's a few things. I ended up founding this group called NYC Blend, which was a nonprofit in New York with other VCs to try to help underrepresented founders get access to venture. And there's a similar program that I joined since I've been in Europe called Emerge. But I think it's really important as a VC because the natural pipeline is not very diverse to find more diverse founders out there. And then I think the way that you assess those founders also matters. So, we had an unbiased training about how do you ask certain questions. And it is, if you look at the stats, there's certain types of questions that get asked more to female founders or male founders. And the gender stats are quoted a lot, I think, especially in Europe. But it's also, if you look at people of color and LGBTQ founders and refugee founders and founders with disabilities, like there's a lot of other categories that are even like way more abysmally represented in the numbers. So I think, we have kind of to take an onus on us of where do we find these deals? How do we make sure we're assessing them in an unbiased way? And we also track our pipeline to see kind of what's a top of funnel, what's lower. And then I think it's about creating the right environment for our team, which is not only having people of different backgrounds, but also enabling really good dialogue where we feel comfortable pushing back on each other. So we actually have a coach as a partnership. So I just got the results of my 360 this week, and they, not only talk to my partners, but also the founders I work with and other people who interact with me a lot. And so we're kind of constantly thinking about how we show up for each other and how we do so in a way that encourages everyone to bring their best self to work and also feel supported.
No, I think that's lovely. And as you said, there are so many different um, people in society that feel marginalized or experience some sort of discrimination. So I think it's really lovely when organizations come together and people as leaders as well to really make people feel included. I think that's really important.
I think it's hard to know what to do because sometimes the issues feel so big that they often feel like you can't impact them. And I think I've definitely changed the way I think about that over my career and like found my own voice on a lot of these things. But I think it's just important to look at it in your own lens and like where you sit. What can you impact and what can't you? And maybe right now you're not managing a team of 20 people and you can't decide who gets hired and all that, but you can probably take someone out to lunch who doesn't look like you. And if you're a white male, maybe that is a female or a black female. But if you're also a black female, maybe it is a male, right? But how do you take someone, and we often put it by identity, but introverts versus extroverts and style and all of these things and background and what university you went to, or if you didn't go to university, like how do you pick someone else out and make them feel included in a way? And there's probably always something in whatever seat you're in that you could do to create a more open culture, no matter what your title or job is today.
Definitely. I think that's so powerful. And I honestly, I couldn't agree more. I think you summed it up perfectly. I think you, of course, with your experience, you have this wonderful aura and confidence with what you have to say, and you've got a lot of experience behind you. There are numerous women across the world in many countries and continents who don't unfortunately have the confidence because of social factors, economic factors, political, cultural expectation, and beyond. How do you think that we can combat a lack of confidence in young girls and women so that they do have the opportunity to pursue a career in STEM if that's what they would like to do?
It's a really good question. I don't know that I have an answer. And I also would say, I don't think that I have like all this confidence, right? I definitely have confidence in certain abilities of mine, but I think it's just that people portray like what you see on the outside is one thing. Like I have self doubt all the time. I was very in my head yesterday about whether or not we should do this deal and if I was judging it right. And I think you always question yourself. I think the key is like to what avail and what's a healthful dialogue in your head and what's not. So like questioning yourself and having some self doubt in the long run is probably a good thing. Like if all you did was think you were perfect all the time, you would never get better, right, at anything. But I also think like people have issues having like either imposter syndrome or low self-confidence to the point where you don't want to do the thing. And I think that so if you're at a debilitating level, I think you just have to find something. I mean, I don't have any of the answers, first of all. And sometimes there's like real help involved. Like one of the things I had after my son was postpartum anxiety, and I actually like went to therapy and specifically addressed it. And it depends on what's causing a lot of your fear or doubt or anxiety or lack of confidence or what that is. And to your point, there's a lot of cultural context, but I think finding something you're good at, so whether that be STEM or whether it be you like singing or painting or whatever, but finding something you're good at and exploring that tends to build confidence. I also think putting yourself in situations that make you uncomfortable, but then figuring them out. So a lot of the times that I lived abroad by myself, were scary, but then once I figured them out, it gave me like a sense of self-confidence that I could figure things out. And so I think going through traumatic moments, which you hope never happen to you, but most people have been through some version of just like almost having your own resilience story. I do that is something I do is like if I hit something really hard in life, I kind of think back to other things that I went through already that were really hard and then remind myself that it sucks at the moment, but you can go through that thing and you'll get to the other side. And so I think there are things you can do to build your confidence, but I think a lot of this goes back to shaking the like what you should do versus what you want to do, which took me a while to do, but even in like middle school, like I went out for volleyball because all my friends played volleyball. I was horrible at volleyball. Like I was benched all the time. I was just not good at anything on the volleyball court. And this was true for like many things I tried in middle school. And then I finally, for me personally, like found theater and dance team. And I was like okay at them and I got better at them and I really liked them. And I think it just gave me, so I think sometimes it takes you a while to figure out what that is, but just find something you're good at and then try to do more of that. And I think it will help you build some confidence.
Yeah, definitely. I think that's a lovely way to think about it. So if you were to directly create like a little summary of advice that you could give to even women who've already established a career and they maybe would like to pursue and change their direction and work in a world of an industry that's new to them or maybe discouraged for women, what would you say?
I would say absolutely go for it. You get one life. I mean, lots of thoughts on the afterlife, but we for sure get this life. So take advantage of it. And I think the other thing is don't be afraid of the no. I think a lot of times to get into a new industry or even to learn if you would like it, you have to reach out to people and ask them if they'll take time to meet with you that you don't know, or you have to read something that makes you uncomfortable or whatnot. But I think don't be afraid of the no. That's the worst thing someone can say. Like you reach out to 30 people, sure, 28 might say no, but the two that say yes might be really valuable conversations. But I think a lot of times we stop ourselves because we're scared of the no. So don't be scared of the no. The only way you get to a yes is by getting a bunch of no's at the end of the day.
I love that. I mean, I love what I do. I'm very fortunate, but even I feel inspired. Like maybe I should go and change my career now. No, I absolutely do love that and I respect that incredibly. So thank you for that. And essentially just a sort of side question to round us off is there's so much rapid digitalization within our world at the moment and we're seeing it expand across all continents. What sort of trends and innovations are you most excited to see?
Great question. And this is one thing I would encourage women to do. So I do quite a bit in like crypto and Web3, Bitcoin and stuff like that. Actually, I'm launching a podcast next week called Founders Uncut. If you want to check it out, I can send the link. But one of my first guests on the show is this incredible female founder named Flory from BlockFi. And I think it's a space that I've spent a lot of time in. So I think a lot about crypto and Web3. I think about financial infrastructure, which maybe sounds really boring, but is actually quite interesting once you get to know it. So a lot of B2B fintech infrastructure. I think there's going to be a lot of climate tech that's really interesting that's already starting to come out. And we do also a fair share of biotech and sort of science-based investments. And there we're just seeing a lot of innovation. So I would say the combination of machine learning and big data applied to biology and also crypto and Web3 and some of the financial infrastructure innovation that's happening right now.
That's really interesting. I would love to hear your podcast, so please do send that across. That sounds amazing. But no, that's really interesting. I don't think I'd never myself anyway personally thought of it in that respect and venturing out into other industries like science and like medicals, and there's so many other industries that are utilizing fintech in different forms of it, which is incredible. So that pretty much summarizes our interview, and I am so grateful to you for your time. It's been an absolute pleasure. If you have any questions or further comments, please feel free to say them.
No, thank you for having me. I think the reason I started the podcast, I'm not very good at the branding side, but I think people need more stories. So I'm sharing founder stories, but I think you sharing people's stories is great. And I think we learn a lot from other founders. Actually, it was Flory from BlockFi who said, she said that she really had this fear of public speaking before, but she decided to start public speaking. She wanted people to see more crypto female founders that have scaled things and feel ignited to start their own thing. And I think that, what did she say? You can't be what you can't see. But I think it's just important to share stories. And sometimes they resonate and sometimes they don't. But I think it's really important to share them. So thanks for having me on.
Oh, of course. I couldn't agree more. I think seeing other people succeed is the most inspiring thing. So we're really, really grateful to have you on with us. So thank you so much. Oh, our pleasure. Thank you very much and take care.
And also, I guess last thing
Yes.
to discuss about it, maybe don't be afraid of industries that you don't know. So for example, like fintech, it sounds really horribly boring from the outside. Don't get me wrong, I understand that. But actually, once you're in it, it touches so many people and it drives so much impact in the world. And I find, at least in the early days of crypto, I was in quite early in 2015. I noticed that a lot of the women that came into the space were really excited by the impact it could have versus like, hey, I'm going to make money or I love the technology. And I think there's a lot of reasons to be excited by a space. So just be curious about the stuff you don't know. And you might find that something that seems a little weird or scary from the outside is actually really compelling for you as well.
That's lovely. Yes, I think that's amazing to say. Well, thank you so much for helping us sort of drive positive change and reach out to as many people as we can. It's been a genuine pleasure speaking with you.
Thanks for having me. It's been a pleasure.